Welcome to episode 206 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourScreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing distributor Keith Leopard from Uncork'd Entertainment. Keith is a distributor behind many of the films that I've showcased on this podcast over the last 12 or so months. A couple of weeks ago, I talked with Martin Gooch, who did the film The Gatehouse. His film is being distributed by Uncork'd Entertainment. And then maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, I had a filmmaker named Justin Price on the podcast. He recently did two films, The 13th Friday and The Elf. Both of those films are being distributed by Uncork'd Entertainment. And there's a variety of other films, and I will talk about, I will mention many of those in the interview. This is a fascinating look at filmmaking from the distributor's perspective. Understanding what type of films can sell in the marketplace is really helpful for screenwriters, because ultimately screenwriters have to sell their scripts to producers, and ultimately producers want to sell these produced movies in the marketplace. So understanding the markets is just so important as a screenwriter. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes, or leaving a comment on YouTube, or retweeting the podcast on Twitter, or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 206. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter, and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now a couple of quick words about what I'm working on. Quick update on my feature film, The Pinch. It's my crime action feature film that I am finishing up post-production on. So I've got what will hopefully be the second to last cut of the film. I've been waiting to get back a few clips from The Colorist, which came back late last week. And now I've got to go back to my editor, insert those cuts, and then we will pump out, as I said, what will hopefully be the second to last cut of the film. I will then watch the film one more time and make any final tweaks. So just a little backstory on these clips, so you kind of understand what is going on with them. I think this is a pretty normal type of a problem to face at this stage of post-production. There was only 4 clips, and one of those clips was split in 2, so I guess 5 clips total. Basically, here's what happened. The colorist, when he did his output, so the editor, we did our locked picture. I then take all of those files and I take them to the colorist. The colorist loads them into DaVinci Resolve. He starts doing the color, and then once he's colored the whole film, he outputs a really high resolution version of the film. It's a 4K version. I think it was over 100 gigs, like just that cut of the film, but it's the entire film in one basic movie file, in one file is what he outputs. So there was a couple of glitches in that output file that he made. There was one 5-second clip that just got repeated over and over again for like 30 seconds. So obviously that needed to be corrected, and just all we have to do is I went back to the editor. We output the non-colored version, but the correct version basically of those clips. And that's the one that got split in half because the repeating went across 2 different cuts in the film. So again, it's probably less than 30 seconds. It's probably like about 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds worth of the film. So you output those, the correct version, uncolored but correct version. And then we sent those to the colorist. He colored them and then he sent them back. There was 2 missing inserts, and it was a clock ticking, and again, for some reason, when the colorist output his version, those inserts didn't get put into this movie file. So again, we just had to give the colorist those exact 2 clips. He just colors those 2 short 5-second, but not even probably 5 seconds, 3-second clips, and then sends those back to us. And then also there was one special effects shot that got corrected by my effects guy. Thank you, Kurt, for that. And then again, that was sent to the colorist, and then he colored it, and then sent that back. So late last week, he sent me all those recolored clips. Now I've got to go with the editor. I've got a couple other corrections that need to be made as well. Hopefully that will be done this week. I'll go up with my editor. I've got to email right after I get done with this podcast. Got to email my editor and see if he is available this week for probably just a couple of hours. I mean, I'm just going to run up there with the drives and, we're going to load up these clips. He's going to drop them in the timeline. There'll be a bunch of other tweaks, but probably just like an hour or two worth of work. And then we'll have another version of the film, which would basically be the completed film. I'll watch that one or two more times, and then that will be pretty much it. There is one minor sound issue, but I probably will not end up dealing with that until a little bit down the road once I find a distributor. When you get a distributor, they run what's called a quality control report. It's a QC report, and basically they run that, and that includes audio issues, but it also includes, any video problems, problems with the picture, missing frames, drop frames, or something like that. It'll catch these things in this QC report, and then you have to go back and make any corrections if you need to. I mean, maybe we'll pass, maybe not. What I'm basically doing is I'm asking some of my friends who are producers kind of what their thoughts are. So basically what I'm doing is I missed there's one line of dialogue that got mixed from the final sound mix. And again, these friends of mine that are producers, they're telling me that I probably won't pass the QC report, and there will be some audio issues, so I will have to go back and do some remixing on the final sound mix. And so that's the time to do and insert this one final line of dialogue. So that's the sort of the issue that I'm wrestling with. But again, I will be able to output a version of the film, and from just the casual observer, they will not even be able to tell that there's anything wrong with it. So that's going to be great. I'm going to be able to do, the Kickstarter people are still waiting to see a cut of the film. So I want to get that to them before the end of the year, a version of the film to them. And then also I want to, would be nice to at least start figuring out a cast and crew screening if I'm going to do that. And then also, as I said, this version of the film, it will be to just, anybody who watches it, they won't notice that there's even a problem, because I will bake that one line of dialogue. I will bake it back into the output version. But then also as film festivals view the film, they'll have a more complete version of the film. There might even be some distributors that I go back to with this latest version of the film as well, and they will be able to watch it and hopefully get a little bit of a better sense of the film as well. So anyways, it's a little bit annoying to have this issue at the last bit, but it's nothing that a few $100s and a little time can't fix. So I'm not too worried about it, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. So hopefully, as I said, by the end of the year, I will have basically a finished version of the film that I can start really showing to people and getting out there. And then again, once I sign on with the distributor, I've started to look at some of these lists of the deliverables, and the deliverables just, it's a whole range of things from still images from the film. They want that. Obviously, they want the trailer, a version of the poster, different types of cuts of the film. So there's just a long list of these deliverables that I've got to work through, and that's a whole other project. But it's somewhat dependent on the distributor you go with. If you go more of the self-distribution route, you need to do a lot less of this kind of stuff. If you go with, a more traditional distributor, there's a variety of things that they require that I will have to work through. So again, I'm not too worried about getting that stuff done at this point. I just kind of want to get the film done, get a version over the Kickstarter people. I mean, they've been waiting now for almost 2 years to see the film. So I want to get them a cut of the film to take a look at. And as I said, just kind of from my own standpoint, basically done with post-production, and then moving on to the distribution and the film festivals and the marketing of the film. All of that will be some new challenges. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on. Now let's go ahead and get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing distributor Keith Leopard. Here is the interview. Welcome, Keith, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So to start out, I wonder if you can just give us a quick overview of your background. Kind of where did you grow up and how did you get into the entertainment business?
Grew up in Portland, Oregon. I live in Dallas, Texas now, but I grew up in Portland. Always was a film nerd. Back then there was no video, there was no cable TV. We had 4 channels in Portland, Oregon, so everybody went to the theater on Saturdays and Sundays, 3 or 4 movies. And back then it was, single screens, so we couldn't even sneak into multiple movies. We had to actually go pay for each movie. And just when I got out of high school, I actually went to college first couple of years in radio broadcasting and realized that that was not going to be a career choice. And I've always loved film, and I went down to San Francisco State, and while I was going to school, there was a small chain of video stores, record stores called Warehouse Records back then, and Blockbuster was just coming into existence then, and I thought, well, this would be kind of cool, and moved back up to Seattle to work for them, and ended up working 11 years in Seattle at the Blockbuster franchise. And in 2000, I came down to Texas to work for Blockbuster Corporate. And when they were about ready to go in final stages of bankruptcy, I just thought, well, at that point, I'm 50 years old. Do I go get another job, or do I take all that I've learned over the years in marketing and movies and artwork and trailering and all that and do my own thing? Mm-hmm. And so I thought of just doing my own thing. So I've been doing that for about 5 years.
Okay. And so specifically, what were you doing at Blockbuster when you got to their corporate headquarters? What was your position within their organization?
So there was 3 buyers there, and we bought all the movies for 4,500 stores. And I would say after about the 3rd year, I was kind of bored. I thought anybody can buy Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings for the stores. So I just went to the head of the department and said, I want to buy all indie product. So for the last 7-8 years I worked there, I basically bought all the product for the stores through all the studios. I guess anybody like Lionsgate or smaller at the time. Lionsgate's bigger now, but back then they were a little smaller. So I just did all the indies. So that gave me like an amazing exposure to just all types of films.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, it seems like that's sort of the opposite position as you're in now. Before, the filmmakers or the distributors were coming to you to sell films. Now you're in the market of trying to find the other buyers. Did you have do the buyers at Blockbuster, do they know the buyers at, these other organizations? Why did you go this direction as opposed to maybe another direction?
Well, the one thing, I've always been a product guy, right? So I tell people how I'm different, I think, from a lot of my competitors is I'm a product person with a distribution company, not a salesperson. So when I'm talking to filmmakers about their movies, I understand the movie, I understand how to market it, because I'm that film guy. I'm not just somebody who says, I need a movie for April and we'll put it in that slot. Mm-hmm. So I traveled a lot. Because I did all the indie work, I knew all the guys at iTunes, and I knew all the, at the various platforms. I also knew all the other distributors, and I knew sales companies because I would work on getting the exclusives for Blockbuster. So when I started my own thing, I already had a pretty good connection with a lot of the folks out there. Mm-hmm. The only ones I didn't have a connection with were actual sales companies, and so I just did what everybody else is. I pounded the pavement and went out there, and the first couple of years were tough trying to get movies, and then after that, when I got a good reputation and started dealing more directly with filmmakers, it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, perfect. So first we're going to start with just sort of some general questions about distribution, and then we'll dive in specifically to some of the films that you've distributed over the last year or so. So specifically, what types of films is your company, Uncork'd Entertainment, looking for?
So I hate to be too nebulous, but it's like I know it when I see it, and that's just with 30-some years in this business of kind of understanding. I think I have a good feel for what the public wants. I do a lot of genre films because I love genre films, and they are still very popular, and I always say genre films are very forgiving. If you do a comedy, it better be funny. A lot of times they're not funny. So it's, the genre films, the horror films, supernatural, those just tend to be a little more forgiving with the general public. Mm-hmm. Because I'm that guy too, right? I watch 9 crappy horror films hoping for that one amazing one. And, when we see that, we all just geek out and go, this is great. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I look for. But because I'm a film guy, I look at foreign films, I look at documentaries, anything that I feel I can cast a pretty wide net to generate revenue back to the filmmaker. Okay.
So now, let's say somebody submits a film to you and you're reviewing it, and maybe even push past things like genre, sort of the typical things. What are some of the mistakes you see from these low-budget filmmakers, these independent filmmakers? What are some of the things that you can tell, like in 5 minutes of watching a film, that it's not going the right direction?
The first thing would be just production value. I know it's easy now to make films, but if you can't do anything correctly, your film needs to look good. And I think that's probably one of the first things I see is the production quality is just not there. Or the next is being different, being something original. 5 kids going to a cabin and getting killed, that's just been done way, way too many times. And what I will hear is, but mine's different. And what I normally say is like, look, my job is to give you what I think, and I think it's not different. I see this type of film all the time. So I'm always trying to give feedback, positive feedback of look around, and if you see a lot of a certain type of movie happening, don't do that. The other thing I try to give feedback on is create a film or a project that goes to a bigger mass than just, say, the fanboy. And what I mean by that is if someone will make a small little movie, and yes, you get lots of coverage on all the sites, but when you go out to the real world, the real public, the person sitting on their couch, clicking through their pay-per-view, it doesn't work then. So I try to get people to think about going beyond just the fanboy or the contained group of customers.
Yeah. So I wonder if there's, and this is hopefully going to sort of dovetail into what we were just talking about, but can you name a few films that you didn't distribute over the last couple of years that you wish you had? Like some good examples of films that you say, wow, that was a really unique film, or that was a film that I would have loved to get.
Well, some of the films I tried to, but being a smaller guy, I was just kind of outbid, was The Babadook. I loved that one. I saw that at a festival. I'm glad IFC got it because they did handle it correctly. But that was one of my favorites. I did like the VHS series. I thought those were really quality. I liked the Tales of Halloween. Okay. Although, from a commercial standpoint, anthology movies don't seem to really catch on with the public. So there's a good opportunity where I like these movies. I really would love to have distributed them, but they would have been smaller, niche kind of titles.
Yeah. So are there some trends that you're seeing in the independent film world, as terms of the audience's appetite? And you're mentioning some of the things like, be original and this kind of thing, but are there some trends? Are there some underserved markets? It was a big studio hit, so I'm sure we're going to see a million, Stephen King and Stephen King-esque movies, coming down the pike. But are there some other trends that maybe are not so obvious to screenwriters?
Yeah, what I'd say is do more. Well, you look at what the studios do that. To put it like, you look at what the studios are doing that is different, and one is the more supernatural versus out and out horror. Blood and guts really doesn't work anymore, and we haven't touched on this, but for foreign sales, horror movies are they flooded the market. Horror doesn't work if you're trying to get your movie sold in other territories as well. I say once a studio movie's come out, if it's been a big hit, then you need to look on the front side of that, and you feel if it's going to be a hit, you need to come out with your scary clown movie before it, because afterwards there'll just be tons of clown movies, and then nobody really wants those anymore. Mm-hmm. I usually tell people more what to stay away from, and like found footage. I don't distribute any more found footage. The genre is tired. For me, you may find one every once in a while that gets a lot of press, but in general, that was played out. Blood and guts, slasher is played out. You're trying to find things that would appeal to a wider audience. Sci-fi is always good because sci-fi costs a little more money, right? I mean, so you have to have a little more in your production to do sci-fi. Practical effects, I tell people work on practical effects. They're cheaper than trying to do CGI, because every time we try to do CGI at our budget level, it looks awful. Mm-hmm. If you do practical effects, it gives you a higher quality look to it. And then actually right now, I tell people Westerns. Mm-hmm. In the U.S., a good solid little Western where people are actually shooting each other and there's real sets. It's just not somebody in a cowboy hat out in the desert. Those still do well. Yeah. So it's kind of looking around at the trends. but not necessarily box office. Really more of like what you're seeing, when you go to iTunes and what's in the top, how they rank the top 50 in there, and kind of look to see if there's anything that's a little different.
Mm-hmm. Are there some specific subgenres? And as I talk to distributors and producers, for instance, family movies always come up. It seems like filmmakers, and I include myself in this, we want to make the next Pulp Fiction. We're not that interested in. So there's millions of guys like me trying to make that next Pulp Fiction, but not so many people that are trying to make the family movie. And then there's even subgenres of, the family movie with a horse or the family movie with a dog. Are there some markets like that maybe feel a little bit underserved?
I think for what I look for, again, the sci-fi that doesn't have to be like ships flying around, but just an interesting kind of what I call mix of sci-fi drama. Like, remember that movie Primer?
Yeah, sure.
Where it was a drama, but it had those sci-fi quirky elements. It was a good script. Movies like that. The family movies are tough because there's so many really good, high-quality ones out there. But you can never go wrong with a dog, right? The talking dog. And I always stay away from just dramas. It could be a great little interesting script or how you grew up. But as I tell people, just because you had a tough childhood doesn't mean everybody wants to watch that same tough childhood. Comedies, stay away from. They don't work without any real cast. So you need to look at genres that work without having any kind of cast. That's where you get back to your horror, western, kids, things like that will do well. You get more credibility, but you don't need the cast.
Okay. So let's talk about just sort of, again, in general, how do you typically find films? Do you go to film festivals? Do you just network with other filmmakers? Just what's the typical flow of a film that you end up distributing, how it came to your attention?
So the early days, it was beating the pavement at all the festivals and markets. And after probably year 3, when I felt I was pretty established, and then a lot started coming to referrals, because in this business, distribution has a bad reputation. So you're trying to find somebody that will report correctly, pay you, and I started getting a very good reputation of paying people, which is odd because you would think if you're owed money, we would pay you, but that's not always how it happens. Yeah. So started getting more referrals, and then I was working with filmmakers, and we do one film, we do another, and we go, hey, we like working together, we get each other, I trust you to deliver the film, you trust me to pay, and now I probably have 7 or 8 filmmakers that I've done 2, 3, 4, or even more films with. So now it tends to be more referrals, more repeat business.
Mm-hmm. And so, how do those types of partnerships work? Do you give them minimum guarantees? Do you just talk to them in the development process and look at what they're thinking about doing and say, yeah, I think this is something I could sell? What does that relationship actually look like?
So for the most part, I don't do any financing. That would come much later. But if, let's say we've done a few films together and I trust that you can deliver correctly, yeah, I might put some money into the pre-production of it. Film regarding MGs, yeah, you can go all the way from no MG to, depending on the scope of the film, how I think we can generate revenue, how we can market it, if there is a big enough audience there. But you have to remember when a distributor takes on their movie, if there's no MG, that doesn't mean there's no skin in the game. It still costs when you look at creating some good artwork, a good trailer, getting everything out there. I'm still in it $8,000 to $12,000 before it even comes out. So we always have skin in the game, but I do understand that people have been burned, and sometimes you want that comfort of an MG. Maybe your financier says, hey, I want a little bit out of that. So that's kind of where I just look at each film on its own merit.
Okay. And again, this is sort of a general question, not specific to any of the films, but someone who wants to work in this low-budget genre film, we're talking about not a lot of cast. What sort of budgets are appropriate in these cases? And again, just a general kind of an estimate. Are we talking about, $500,000? Are we talking about sub $100,000? What would you recommend to a filmmaker who wants to make one of these films and actually expects to recoup their finances?
So everybody has the story, I made this movie for $5,000, we made a ton of money. But let's just talk in general then. Mm-hmm. The movies that I've seen over the past 5 years, you can call that first film. You can call in favors, and you can do it. You might find a special effects guy that has a day job but wants to do a movie. So there's lots of different ways to do that. But I feel you need to be in that 75,000 minimum to have the movie look good, so that you can rent a good camera package and all that. Where we see the difference is when you start getting to the 125, 150, maybe up to 200. Then you're really starting to see, you can get a much better quality movie, maybe some better effects, and not necessarily cast, but people that can act. That's the other thing is, if you make a $50,000 movie, but you go out and get 5 people that want to act in LA, they're not really actors. I always say go to a smaller town, find young people, old people, maybe what you'd consider good-looking people and character people. So it really makes the film look very different. I think the big stumbling block is you see a lot of movies made and it's just 5 or 6 of the same, all 20 to 25-year-old male, female, and everybody kind of looks the same. Mm-hmm. So we always stay away from that. From a standpoint of how do you, if you get up to that 300, 400, 500,000, then you got to really look at the movie like how am I going to generate my revenue back? And when I talk to people when they get to that level is like, guys, let's lay out every possible way to generate revenue, whether it's Netflix, Redbox, Walmart, all these different players. And then you can kind of almost reverse engineer, do I have to hit on every single cylinder for me to even break, just to break even? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes, then it's like, guys, maybe you want to pare back on what you're spending on that movie.
Yeah. So I just have, this is sort of a specific distribution question, and a lot of filmmakers have been telling me, watch out for these sort of when a distributor has a whole bunch of films, they package them together and they make a deal, and that deal is, your film is sort of in that deal. And I've heard a lot of filmmakers tell me, be careful of this, but what are some strategies to try and get a good deal in that sense? Like when a distributor signs a deal of like 10 or 20 films at once, how do you figure out what percentage goes to what film? Because all films are not created equal, and the value of the films bringing to that package are certainly different.
Well, so the packaging, you see packaging a lot in international sales. For the U.S., in my experience, the packaging really comes much later down the road after you've exhausted the transactional, the SVOD, all that. Mm-hmm. And what I do, quite honestly, is I just look at, if I'm selling, let's say, 20 movies to a TV station, at that point, that far down the road, I just put everyone at the same amount. I don't do any funny games where I, apply a higher margin to one versus the other one, because you're in the life cycle of the movie where it feels like all movies are kind of created equal at that point anyway.
I see.
Now, there's also, I've stayed my size because I never wanted to get to where I'm like releasing 10, 15 movies a month. Under the Uncork'd label, we only release 2 to 3 a month, and that way we can say, look, I touch every movie I work on. I don't give it to an intern or somebody else, so I work on the artwork, the trailering, and I can focus on each one. There are some companies that are bigger aggregators that will take on a lot more number of films, and we just chose not to do that because it's hard to give everybody kind of a fair shake if you've got too many films. But that's just my size, right? If I had maybe 2 or 3 of me, I might get to do more.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to run through some of these films, and I'm kind of going to ask the same question about all of them. And you can just give this, we can kind of call this like a lightning round where we'll run through this hopefully pretty quickly. So I just interviewed Martin Gooch on my podcast. He did a film called The Gatehouse, which you guys are distributing. And I'm curious, first off, how did you get involved with that project? He's a UK filmmaker. I don't think you had worked with him before. So how did you find that film?
So that was 100% referral.
Okay.
It was somebody that I'd worked, I had worked on a movie called Treehouse 4 years ago, and to this day I still pay overages, and the producer on that I think he was talking to one of the producers on Gatehouse, and I think she mentioned, we're getting ready to go out there and look for a distributor in the US, and he was like, call Keith.
Okay. And what does that mean, overage? You've been paying overages. What does that mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. So, you pay all the revenue that keeps coming in over the years. I take my fee and then I pay overages. So
I see.
Yeah, it's a industry term for, hey, look, I keep making money, so I keep paying you. And in this business, it has a reputation of, after the first couple of years, you don't hear from the distributor, and there's no reports, and there's no revenue. And we try to just really keep, if I make money, I pay.
Yeah. So what attracted you to this project? What was it that you thought you could ultimately sell?
It was different, right? It's more of a spooky little fairy tale. I love movies that are shot in Europe because you have instant production value with all the castles. It's hard for us to go find castles over there. Every block has one. I liked the way it was shot. I liked the way it was lit. And it was an interesting story. So that I can go, all right, I can take this and I can market it, make it maybe a little more supernatural than it really is. Give it a few little horrific elements, make it seem more fairy tale-ish, and there's a creature in there, and hopefully that appeals to a pretty wide audience.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about two of Justin Price's film. I just interviewed him a couple weeks ago as well. He did a film, The Elf and The 13th Friday, were the two films that I was talking specifically to him about. So maybe you can talk about those projects. And my understanding from talking to him was that he had kind of bounced the ideas of these films off of you ahead of time. So this is sort of an example of someone you had worked with before, and we're working with one of these, I guess, 7 filmmakers that you trust.
Right, so Justin and I have worked on quite a few films together, and what we do, because he knows how to deliver a film on a decent budget, and I think he gets pretty good production values for his budget. So what we do is him and I just will sit around and noodle on, ideas. And the 13th Friday was originally like, all right, I want to make a Friday the 13th movie that we can bring out on Friday the 13th, but we don't want to call it Friday the 13th, just in case. And so we came up with the 13th Friday. And, it has nothing to do, clearly, with the Friday the 13th, but we thought it'd be kind of a fun play on the word. And then I just said, go out and write me a treatment, and then we talk about the treatment, and then he writes a script, and we talk about it, and I tell him, here's the things that I want to see. And one of the things that Justin's very good at, which you need to be in a lower budget movie, is things have to happen early and often. There are no slow burns. You can't do a slow burn. You can't say, oh, hey, wait till the last 10 minutes, they're a doozy. Something's got to happen right away, and then every, 10 pages. Mm-hmm. And then with The Elf, we were just thinking about, because every year I try to release some Christmas horror movies. We did a couple Krampus movies in the past, and I'm like, I didn't want to go back to the well again on another Krampus movie, so we were just talking, and I'm like, it's been a long time since anybody made like a killer elf movie. Let's just do that, and then we just have calls and talk about it. So it's a very collaborative effort, and it's more just like if you and I were sitting around having a beer or a cup of coffee going, what would be kind of a cool film to make that, not everybody's making.
Mm-hmm. And so, again, what kind of influences or educates you on what that would be? Is it just the films you're seeing submitted, the films you're seeing selling? Are you talking to buyers as well, and the buyers are saying, yeah, we love holiday horror movies, can you get some more of those?
I will tell you, and this might sound like a cop-out, but a lot of it is I've just been doing this for so long, I don't talk to guys, I just come up with things that I think as a buyer. So remember, I'm an ex-buyer, right? Mm-hmm. I spent 23 years buying. I just think of the things that I would have bought and as a buyer of Blockbuster and how they would have rented and how they would have done. And, even though brick and mortar's gone, it's still a movie, right? The same movie that a cool idea 30 years ago, the very beginning of VHS, is still cool now on digital. Mm-hmm. So there's not like a structure, and I think that's probably why, otherwise it'd be really easy and everybody would go out and just make, these movies and everything would be a huge hit.
Yeah. So American Exorcism is a movie I wanted to just mention briefly. Was that an example of one of these sort of you want to trail or draft off of all of the other exorcism movies that are coming out, some bigger budget exorcism movies? Maybe you can talk a little bit. What's that?
Definitely. I mean, look, we do movies like that all year long. I did one called Ouija Exorcism, and that just came because we were like, well, Exorcist movies work, Ouija movies work, why don't we do that? Mm-hmm. We originally were going to do Ouija versus Krampus, but then we poo-pooed that idea. But we did an Alien kind of knockoff this year. American Exorcism was a guy like, hey, I want to do an exorcism movie, and we were just trying to think of different ways to make that happen. We did an Amityville knockoff this last summer. So, we'll do our fair share of, I guess we'll call it asylum-type movies, I worked with those guys early on at Blockbuster, so I've got a history of kind of, looking at what types of things to draft off of, and that's how we do it. But you'll normally see me only go back to the well a couple times, and then I move on to something else. I just don't want to be, the guy that made the 10th Exorcist movie, and that's the one that, nobody wants.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, why did you poo-poo Krampus versus why? What was it about that idea that didn't work?
Well, because, in general, horror comedies do not work to a wide audience. And we just thought Ouija versus Krampus was starting to seem a little cheesy, and so I was like, guys, let's just find something different.
Okay. Camera Obscura, I interviewed Aaron Kuntz a few months ago as well. I'd be curious to hear kind of how you found that project and what was it you liked about that one?
Oh, so that one's actually pretty easy. It was produced by Chiller, and NBC Universal puts them out on digital, but when it comes to DVD, because it's really a smaller market, they just came to me through a referral and said, we need someone to help us with the DVD rights on this. I watched the movie. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so I took it out to help them sell it just for DVD. So they did their own digital and I did the DVD. So I will work with a lot of vendors like that. I probably work with 3 or 4 like that where I just help them with their DVD.
I see. How about My Pet Dinosaur? I interviewed Matt Drummond last, I think it was maybe March, on his film. What was it? And that was kind of a cute family film, like sort of an E.T. type of a thing. What was it about that? How did you find that film, and what was it about that attracted you to it?
Well, so Matt's amazing, right? I mean, he does these effects that are like multi-million-dollar effects for basically next to nothing. And I saw his movie Dinosaur Island, I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I just thought the effects were amazing. And he, of course, he makes My Pet Dinosaur, and we hooked up through a referral again, and I don't do a lot of family movies. I saw this, and I'm like, this is a cool family movie. The effects are great. The acting's good. And I told him, I said, I think I can do something with this, across all platforms. And, he had heard good things about us and that we get a good reach. And if we make, money, we pay everybody. And so he was like, I'll take a chance and let's partner on this one.
Mm-hmm. And so what is it about family movies that you say, well, we don't do a lot of family movies? Is it just, the buyers that you have connections with are more into the horror movies, and so you just don't have those connections? Or is there something just inherent in family movies that you think is more risky?
The family movie can be riskier because, one, there's so many good, high-quality movies out there. Yeah. And there's a lot of guys that are out there that already have, output deals with, say, Disney Channel and all the TV broadcasters, so they can go out and make a higher quality film, and they get it sold to TV and what have you. If I made a film, even if we spent a couple $100,000, that's not going to guarantee you a TV sale. Parents are fickle. Kids are fickle. You might say, I got a cute little dog movie, and the mom says, I don't like that dog, or something on those lines. So it's not my comfort zone. And that's why, if My Pet Dinosaur had just been My Pet Golden Retriever, I probably wouldn't have worked on it. But with being dinosaur and effects, I can do more. I can really generate more revenue on that type of film.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about Bornless Ones. That's a movie I talked with Alex, probably, man, it's got to have been 9-10 months ago, on his film. I was really impressed with his film. I really enjoyed it. That was one that I watched all the way to the end. So how did you find that film, and what attracted you to it?
So they were working with a sales company that I've done probably 7 or 8 films with, and he brought it to me first, and I watched it, and it kind of, reminded me of Evil Dead-ish, and I thought the acting was good. I thought the story was cool, and the effects were great, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to work on this.
Okay. And how about Antimatter? I interviewed Keir Burrows again probably 6 months ago, and that was a film you mentioned, Primer, earlier. That movie sort of reminded me of that. Maybe you can talk about how you found that film and
yeah. So referral. So I hate to keep saying referral, but again, that's why you work really hard, and I try to have this reputation of I understand when I'm talking to filmmakers how to market your film. We get it out there, and if we make money, we pay you. So I get a lot of referrals. But I saw that one, and I was like, man, this is really smart. It was an extremely smart script. And anytime in this lower budget world, you can work with an amazing script, because look, a lot of times the scripts are lacking. I was like, I want to be a part of this, and I started working with them probably a year ago, December, and then I met Keir at the Berlin Film Festival just to talk to him, meet him. I always like to meet people face to face if I could, and I was like, look, I loved your movie. Here's how I would market. I would make the artwork a little more sci-fi-ish, but and I'll cut the trailer to be a little more action sci-fi-ish. But I'm like, this is one that I have no doubt if somebody watches it, they won't say, I really enjoyed that, and then they will tell a friend to watch it.
Okay. And how about All Girls Weekend by Lou Simon?
So I love Lou. I've worked with Lou on Hazmat, All Girls Weekend, and we just finalized her latest one, 3. I'm going to be helping her distribute that. We just hit it off, and I try. Her movies are lower budget, but she's like the jack of all trades. So I tell her, like, look, I want to be involved, and hopefully I can hit singles, doubles, and maybe an occasional home run for you. So this will be the 3rd film I've worked with her on.
Okay, perfect. How about Cold Moon by Griff first? And that was actually a fairly recent interview I did with him probably a month or 2 ago.
Yeah, so Griff came through a sales company that I've used quite a few times, but I had a call with him, and we just hit it off, and I talked about what my strategy. I love the movie, right? It reminded me of Body Heat and Blood Simple, but with some cool special effects. So we started talking. I felt it was a good enough film to give it a 10 market theatrical release. I guess the industry term is premium VOD, so it hits theaters but digital at the same time, and you get much better placement for your movie. So we did a 10 market release for him. I also include filmmakers, as much or as little as they want. And Griff's a very hands-on guy, so we talked about the artwork. We talked, when I cut a new trailer, we talked about that. So he was very, very much hands-on in that. We did a big premiere out in LA. His father had recently passed away, so we did a premiere where we, dedicated to him. And so I really enjoyed working with him as a person, as well as I thought the movie was just awesome. And so it's out there right now doing pretty well.
Okay, perfect. Let's see here. If there's just one title, and this is kind of a general question, if there's just one title Uncork'd Entertainment has done over the last 5 years that you were super proud of, like if you just wanted people to watch one movie that you've done over the last 5 years, what would that movie be?
Oh boy, that's like the Sophies Choice, right? Well, I would say I've got can I do 2 or 3?
Sure, yeah, 2, yeah, no problem.
There was a movie probably 3 years ago called Avenged. It was originally called Savaged. We changed it, but the production values were amazing. The story was really cool. I just really enjoyed that as I don't like to say, especially nowadays, the genre, rape revenge, but it was one of those types. But it was just the way it was made, and everything was just wonderful. we did a movie early on when I first started called The Dinosaur Project, and that was a British film. It was actually a combination found footage, but the effects were great. That was a very solid movie. And then I would say within the last year, I would say a movie called The Hollow. If you haven't seen that, it's a wonderful film. It's a lot like a Blood Simple or a Body Heat. Miles Doliak directed that. And then Cold Moon is my other one right now.
Okay, perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with you guys? Anything you're comfortable sharing, a website, a Twitter handle, anything, I can round up and put all that in the show notes so people can just learn more about Uncork'd.
All right, well, now you've exposed me. I have Twitter and I have a lot, but I don't run that. I don't have time. Mm-hmm. So if you've dealt with Clint and his team at October Coast, they do all my PR. They help me with the Twitter and all that. Otherwise, we have a website that I list all the titles, but it's really Clint and his team do a wonderful job with all my PR.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll round up some of those accounts and I'll put them in the show notes. So no problem at all. So Keith, I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous. This was great information. I think it's really fantastic for screenwriters to hear this kind of information because ultimately screenwriters have to write scripts that somebody can produce and make money on. And you're absolutely correct. You're like the one distributor who really does have a good reputation. So I applaud you for that. You're literally the only one that I know of. So good on you for that.
Yeah, look, it was, when I started this, I was like, okay, I know how bad the reputation is. How do I create a model where, I have to make money, right? We all have to make money, but if I make money, then the filmmaker, producer, financier make it as well. And a lot of it was just, I watched the cost, but I also partner with other trustworthy people. So I know the guy doing my trailer is doing a good job, and we just really watch it. And I think being a fan and being a product guy versus just a sales guy has really helped. Yeah, for sure. So, well, Keith, I wish you luck with all of these films. And once again, thank you for coming on and talking with me. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye. Just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and I emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. And so far, I have around 400 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter, get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or who are looking to hire screenwriters for specific projects that they are working on. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or their properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots through these leads. So it's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and hopefully among your scripts there will be lots of matches and lots of stuff that you can submit to them. And these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Carol Kishner, who is an entertainment career strategist. She has a ton of experience in television. She created the CBS Diversities Institute Writers Mentoring Program, and she helped develop the WGA showrunners training programs, the curriculum for that program. So she's got a lot of great advice for people looking to break into television. So keep an eye out for that episode next year. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Keith.
So the one thing I want to be real clear at, and I'm going to talk more about this. This is going to be kind of the focus of this final segment of the podcast. I want to be real clear that I'm not suggesting that you just copy what other people are doing. And there's a little bit of that in Keith's model, like what we discussed, American Exorcism. These are movies that are clearly sort of designed to piggyback on other larger movies out there that are spending a lot on marketing, that are popular, and you can kind of ride those coattails. And that's not really what I'm suggesting, and I don't even think that is necessarily what Keith would suggest to a new writer trying to break in or trying to meet a producer who is producing movies for somebody like Keith. I think it's more a matter of understanding the marketplace. The more original and the more creative you can be within certain confines, I think the better off you will be. There's a great line in the Blake Snyder book, Save the Cat. It goes something to the effect of, they want the same but different. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's not a matter of just, copying or doing something that's derivative. It's a matter of doing something that fits into a box where there's clearly an audience for it, but doing something that is original and unique, but yet still can check off these boxes, meaning that it still has an audience. And I think a great example of that is someone like Quentin Tarantino. I mean, he really goes into these genre films with a kind of a new, unique angle, and he's able to give it kind of a twist. I mean, all the way back to something like Reservoir Dogs was very much a gangster film. There have been films sort of like that before, limited location, seedy guys, crimes, bank heists gone bad. I mean, those are things we've seen in films, for decades, but he gave it a unique and an original twist. And I think that's really the key, is giving these tried and true genres, giving them your unique and interesting twist. Now, I got a question a couple of weeks ago from a listener, and I thought that was something that I would read here and try and answer it. And I thought it was really kind of made sense, because it made sense in this context of talking to Keith, because I understand that a lot of people are listening to this podcast and thinking, well, I don't want to be a producer or a director. I want to just write. And, is there a place for me? So let me just quickly read this letter that I got from a listener. So the listener's email, it went something like this: love your blog and have learned a lot from it. Primarily what I have learned is that you need a ton of ambition to get your script up on the big screen. That's definitely true. I mean, it's going to take a lot of hard work no matter how you go about this. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to take a lot of hard work. Okay, so back to the email. My question to you, however, is what about us writers far away from Los Angeles who really just like to write and would be happy to sell our scripts to ambitious guys and gals like yourself and let them do their best with it? I'm beginning to feel like that unless I'm willing to run my scripts all the way to the end zone, I shouldn't even be playing. I'm retired and really don't want to learn how to produce, direct, or talent negotiate, or be a talent negotiator at this stage of my life. Is script writing only considered old school now, and is there still a marketplace interested in buying scripts from writers like myself? Would love your quick thoughts on this. So I think my answer to him, and I'll kind of read through my response to him. The first thing I want to state, and I state this a lot, and I want to be super clear, nothing in the entertainment industry is written in stone. There's nothing that is like only one way to do it. And if someone ever tells you this is the only one way to do it, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, and you kind of want to turn away and probably take advice from someone else. So please keep that in mind. Any advice that I give you, it's not the single only way to do it. It's just, there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to these questions and to these answers. And this is just my opinion. And it's just my opinion at this particular moment in time. You ask me in another week, you ask me in another year, I might totally change my mind. I mean, everything is evolving and changing. And again, there's no one way to skin a cat. There's no one way to be successful in this business. So let's start with the question: is it old school to be writing and selling scripts? I'd say absolutely not. You can still sell spec scripts. It's happening all the time. I've sold spec scripts over the course of my career. I've known lots of screenwriters who have sold spec scripts. So if that's truly your mission, that's how you feel your talents are best utilized, there's definitely no shame in that, and that's definitely a way to go about a career in the entertainment industry, writing spec scripts and trying to sell them. My big problem with that, and as I said, I've done that over the course of my career. I've sold numerous spec scripts. Many of them have been produced. You can look me up on IMDb to check all of those out. But my big frustration with that process has just been the lack of creative control with those projects. When you sell a spec script to a director or a producer, they're the ones that have the money, and ultimately they're the ones that are going to make the decisions. And so it just has always felt a little bit creatively unfulfilling when I've done that. And that was a big part of my reasoning for going out and doing The Pinch, was I wanted to be the director and the producer and the one ultimately raising the money. Raising the money is the hardest part, but I wanted to be the person that did that for my film, The Pinch, because ultimately it's the person that raises the money, is the person that gets to make the decisions. And that's as it should be. I mean, when money is on the line, someone is responsible for that money, and someone ultimately has to try and make that money back. So it's that person that raises the money that ultimately has final say in this business. And that's, again, as it should be. But that was been my big frustration with writing the spec script, selling it, and then watching it on the big screen, and just, barely even resembling what sort of I had envisioned as a filmmaker or as a writer. It's barely what I had envisioned, what ends up showing up on screen. So I found that process to be a ton of work. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort, and is the fruits of that effort and work worth the final result? And that's something only you can answer. I mean, only you can go through the process, and you can kind of decide for yourself if that's worth it for you. So for me, I'm pretty organized, and a lot of what I do, running this podcast and running the websites that I run, it's similar to producing. I'm managing people, organizing people, keeping things on task, keeping things on calendar. So a lot of those things that I do in my daily, day-to-day work life, I think are very applicable to being a producer, just staying organized and getting people organized and managing people. So for me, it was not a difficult transition to try and do some actual producing on a film. But that might not be your situation. You might just have absolutely no interest in that. And again, that's totally fine. But ultimately, I do think you're going to have to really go through this process and figure out what that's like. Sell a couple spec scripts, option a couple spec scripts, and see how those turn out. And that's one of the reasons why I keep going back to this about short films. The reason I'm so bullish on short films is that they're easy to write, they're fairly easy to get produced, and so you can go through this entire process of taking a script. And no, you're not going to make a lot of money off it, but if you write a halfway decent short film, or halfway aggressive marketing it, I feel reasonably confident that you can find a director, a producer, and maybe even an actor who will be willing to go and produce this short film for you. And then you can get through the whole process, and you can start to figure out for yourself, I enjoyed the process for this, but I was a little disappointed in how the film turned out. Or maybe you're happy with the film turned out. Maybe you find a good collaborator. Maybe you find that director who you work well with, and he understands your vision, and he's able to translate what you write onto the screen, and you're happy with that relationship. But you can only find those relationships, and you can only, get into those positions where you understand what you like by actually doing it. You're not going to be able to listen to a podcast and understand that. So I'd say that's kind of the long and the short of it. Can you still sell spec scripts? Absolutely. I mean, that's a large part of what I'm still trying to do as a screenwriter, and certainly a large part of what I'm trying to do here at sellingyourscreenplay.com. I'm not offering services to learn how to be a producer. I'm offering services so that screenwriters can potentially meet producers, network with producers, get their scripts in the hands of producers. So it's definitely is still a part of my strategy, and I definitely think it's still a part of should be a part of any writer's strategy. But again, is it worth the effort? And that's something you're going to have to go through the process to really know if it's worth the effort for you. So, and this kind of leads me back to my own career and what I've been working on this year. So I want to take a minute to just talk about that. This is going to be the last episode of the year. The next episode is going to be, I think, January 2nd or January 1st. That first week of January, I'll put out the next episode. But this will be the last episode this year. So I thought it would be a good time to just run over what else I've done this year, aside from The Pinch, what else I've got writing-wise. So let me just run through that. And I've talked about many of these options and, just the different things that some of the different different writing projects that I've been working on. So hopefully this will kind of bring people up to speed. So I still have two options that are still out there and active. One is my contained, female-driven thriller. I've talked about that script numerous times. I've optioned it. This is the current producer that has it optioned is the third producer that's optioned the script just since I've been doing the podcast. It was one of the first options. It was another producer, but it was the same script. It was one of the first options I ever talked about right when I started the podcast, within the first few months of doing the podcast. I think that producer had the script for a year or so, and then the next producer had the script for a year or so, and now this producer, who I actually met on Inktip, she has had the script, I think, since March. So I think she's got another couple of months. She is working hard on the script, and she actually sent me a text yesterday, so I'll hopefully talk to her on the phone today. She's definitely working hard trying to get the script going, so you don't have high hopes for that. It's always tough to raise money, as I said, but I do have high hopes with that one. The other option I still have active is my baseball comedy. This is another one I've been talking about pretty much since I started the podcast. I knew this. I met this producer through my own email and fax blast, and I met him before the podcast even started. So this has been one. He's optioned the script, and I think the option has lapsed for 6 months, and he's come back and re-optioned the script, and I think he's got the script optioned through the end of this year, and I think even into January. My guess is he will re-option it again because he had a couple of things that he was working on. So that's the options that I currently have. Again, I've mentioned numerous options in the podcast, and if I mentioned them, you can assume now that they've been pretty much elapsed without going anywhere, because these are the only two, at least looking at my board of scripts and options, these are the only two that I think I currently have active. I've talked about over the summer and the into the fall, I talked about the 2 TV pilots that I wrote for a producer. It was the same producer's 2 TV pilots. One of them was sort of a thriller, and I don't think that one is going anywhere, at least not with me involved. The producer and he had another partner on that project. I don't think they were crazy about the pilot that I came up with that, and they are reworking that one. Maybe I'll hear from them on that one again. Maybe I won't. I'm not sure. The other one is a kids TV show, and I talked to this producer last week, and he's still out there. He's got a couple of angles to play on that. So who knows? Maybe he'll be able to get that one going here in the early part of next year as well. So again, I have high hopes for that one. It would be a great project. I'd love to see that one go, just because it would be something that my kids, I could take my kids and they could watch it, and that'd be super fun just to have a nice fun family show that that I had written and can actually show my family, as opposed to The Pinch, which has a lot of foul language and and violence, and is certainly not something you'd want to show your kids. And the last thing I wanted to mention, in the fall, I think of 2015 on the podcast, I talk about 2 writing assignments that I did pretty much back to back. One of them, I think, fell through. I did do the writing assignment. They paid me, but I don't think that script will ever get produced. The other one, the script did actually get produced, and I think it's coming out in 2018. It's called Snake Outta Compton. It is a spoof. So it's nice to see that one finally move along. I haven't seen a cut of the film, so I honestly have no idea how it turned out. The trailer looked pretty funny, so again, I have high hopes for that one. Hopefully it turned out well, and they did a good job on it. But I think that pretty much wraps up kind of what I have going film-wise here, sitting here at the end of 2017. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.